Hello, thanks for joining us. Welcome to episode 4 of Architects of Acceleration. I'm your moderator, Philbert, Shih, founder of Structure Research. In our previous episodes, we've looked at development, construction, and the multifaceted process of working with the community and the public sector to put together an AI-focused data center. This episode is all about execution, what it takes to turn all that work, that vision into reality, and of course, the unique aspects we want to take a dive into the unique aspects of operating an AI-ready data center. So to walk us through that, I'm joined by Laura Laltrello, Chief Operating Officer of Applied Digital. Thanks for joining us, Laura.
Thank you, Phil, for having me.
Yeah, so just to kick it off, want to just, you've been obviously, head down on this project for quite a while. Just kind of frame the challenge for us. I think, a lot of people are new to just this whole idea of building out AI infrastructure. I think it's important to know it's just not just about hardware and building blocks. It's about executing across the hardware, the infrastructure, power, cooling, people, community, policy. I'll stop there and let you kind of frame kind of that challenge of taking that vision to execution and operation.
Absolutely. We've come a long way. We have found the site, found the power, started the construction of the building, built the building. We're almost to where we're starting execution, which will start in October of this year. And that's where some of the next level of hard part begins, and we need to make it work. If you think about what it takes to operate an AI infrastructure data center, most people recognize there's servers and networking equipment that are in the building along with storage. What you need to do, though, is be able to power that and be able to cool it. Those are two of the main components of the infrastructure that supports those servers, network devices, and storage, because they both need to be able to get power in, and you need to be able to cool it, and then you need to have the people in place that can run that facility on a daily basis.
Mm-hmm. And so maybe contrast that with like what a traditional data center, kind of what are the main differences that an operations team like yours has to deal with in both the planning, execution, and operation stages?
Sure. This is a very large transition for the industry. If you think about a traditional data center, it operates between 4 to 9 kilowatts per rack. The racks in this data center, so the same footprint, is going to be 100, 130 kilowatts per rack. And so you're putting 1,000 plus kilowatts of power in about 1,000 square feet. So that power density is going to cause us to have to shift in the way we do heat management. And if you think about air conditioning cools a room, so it blows air everywhere. And that's not that efficient or effective when you're talking about a power density that's this high. So you have to flip your cooling systems from air to liquid. Well, liquid has its own challenges. So when you're doing liquid cooling, you're running liquid onto a cold plate through the servers so that it's hitting the GPUs, the hottest component that's sitting in the servers. And as that liquid goes through a pipe, as most of you know, if you have a house and you plumbed a house, leaks can happen. So now you're going to have to think about how you manage that, how you ensure leaks do not happen, because that can be a very destructive day in a data center. And on the power side, you have to find enough power, which we've done, to be able to pull it into the building. But then you have to have redundancy for that power to make sure nothing goes down. You have to have backup generation for that power so that if something fails in the power plant, you can still keep your building up and running. And the team that operates that has to be able to operate all of that mechanical and electrical equipment to keep it up and running so that the servers, storage, and network devices stay intact and are doing some form of AI workload.
So it sounds like contingency planning is really a big part of the difference, and I guess what keeps you up at night. Maybe for the audience, maybe share just some of those operational realities, like how in depth and how kind of how many scenarios you have to plan, how much disaster planning, contingency planning you have to implement into kind of the project.
Absolutely. Like when you're operating any major facility or critical infrastructure like a hospital, you're thinking about what happens if the power goes out, or what happens if people are unable to get to and from work. The same thing is true with a data center. And that's true for any size data center. But when you're putting it in North Dakota, which is a fairly remote environment, you have to think about things like 14-foot snowdrifts and making sure that you can get people in and out of work. The fortunate thing with North Dakota that a lot of people don't think about or realize is when we think about winter, we think about natural disaster. North Dakota has some of the lowest, if not the lowest, outages of their power grid because they're able to plan for that natural disaster, where the rest of the world is adjusting to extreme heat. And in many cases, you don't have the ability to plan for that. And North Dakota is fortunate enough not to have tornadoes or hurricanes or other extreme weather that you get in some other states. So we definitely plan for natural disaster. We plan for snow. We plan for things like what happens so that we're monitoring the equipment to make sure that there's no leaks or liquid failure in the data hall. You even plan for things like humidity and temperature and making sure that you have enough fuel in the tanks so that if the backup or the power goes down, your generators can operate because they have fuel to go operate them. So we are thinking through and planning all of those steps, both from the getting the sources of our third-party services to get things like diesel fuel on site, to having enough trained staff that can be within a certain range of the call centers or the data center so that they can get to the data center as needed.
And is there obviously all of this is kind of part of the planning process. Interested to hear kind of what you think in terms, or not what you think, but what you're implementing in terms of the balance between people and technology that helps you do this contingency planning. Any interesting kind of technology, either processes or actual, software tools or things that you built internally to assist in, dealing with these issues and, make it more efficient?
Yeah, that's a great question, Phil. Every data center, and ours is no different, has a system that a building management system and a monitoring system that takes sensors that are located throughout the data center. So they could be located on the pipes for liquid cooling. They could be located to check temperature or check humidity in the data halls. And all of that data goes into a building management system and a maintenance management system so that you can see what's happening real time in the data center. So if the temperature starts going up by 2 degrees, you know what to do and how to go react. If something looks like it's a little bit too humid, it could be in one spot in the data center, you know how to go and check on that. It also includes all of the equipment that we have to maintain. So a server in a data center might be refreshed every 3 years. So you bring it in, you use it, and 3 years later, you refresh it and put something else in. The operational equipment, so what runs power and cooling in the data center, will stay there for 30 years. And there's maintenance that has to be done on a routine basis to keep that equipment up and running. And there are things that need to be changed out, like filters and batteries. So all of the information on what those assets are and what work they need to be cared for is in a software tool that we have facilities operators looking at to know what they need to do on a routine basis.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. Great insights. You talked about grid reliability. Did not know that. I don't live in North Dakota. But, I wanted to transition to kind of talking about, lowering total cost of ownership in terms of how it relates to the design. Talk about grid reliability. Maybe you can talk about some of the things around, how North Dakota can help deliver lower PUE and, around stranded power, around renewable energy in the area, as well as kind of maybe we can touch on water a bit, but I'll let you kind of tackle that piece one by one.
Sure. So let's start with PUE. And for the audience that doesn't know PUE, it's power usage effectiveness. And it's a measure that was put in place to say, how much power are you using in total, divided by how much power are the servers and storage and networking equipment using in their portion of the data center. It's not a perfect metric, but it's a pretty good estimate of how much does it take to cool your equipment and support that equipment in the data center. And the closer you get to 1.0, the more effective or efficient that data center is. And one of the advantages we have in North Dakota and why the climate matters is we have up to 220 days of free cooling per year. And what that means is there's no mechanical refrigeration needed to cool those servers. We can go circulate the liquid outside to a giant radiator that ends up cooling the liquid so that when it pumps back into the data hall, it is able to cool the servers and just use the outside air or the ambient air to cool it. And that is a tremendous advantage. It's the same as living in a climate where you don't have to turn on your air conditioning every summer versus where you have to turn on your air conditioning. So your power bill goes down significantly. The other piece that we were able to take advantage of is in power, your grid has to be balanced. You have to have just as much supply as you have demand, or you have problems. So every day, all of the grid operators are working to make sure that the power gets to where it's needed so people don't have blackouts, but you're not generating too much power. And in some cases, there has been power generated, like the wind farms that we have in North Dakota, but they didn't have the transmission or the ability to move that power to where it's needed. So it becomes stranded power. And if you can take advantage of that stranded power as we are in North Dakota, you can get significantly reduced rates and sometimes negative rates because otherwise the power utility has to do work to balance that generation, and you can offset that by being able to use it. The third big advantage that we created in our total cost of ownership of this data center design is as we've needed to move to liquid cooling, and liquid cooling is being used now by a lot of the hyperscalers that have really big data centers, and it's being used by high performance computing, which is, big power density servers that are doing complex problems like weather prediction or cancer research. In this case, as we move to AI, more data centers are going to look like that and need liquid cooling. And in many cases to date, the companies have used evaporative cooling to go cool their data center. And with evaporative cooling, you essentially evaporate the water into the air and then you pump new water that's cooler into your system. And that causes hundreds of millions of gallons of water to be used every year. In our solution, we use a closed loop system, which means the exact same water circulates every day of the year through the data center, making our data center, which is a 100 megawatt building, as efficient in water as a 4-person household. So we consume as much water as 4 people would on an annual basis, where if you use evaporative cooling, it's more like 3,500 per person household.
Very interesting. So I just wanted to just double click on the stranded power. How much, I don't know if you have a sense for how much, energy that supplies to the data center. Is that maybe on a percentage basis, or is it just,
I would love to be able to answer that question. It's a hard question to answer because there are a couple of things that we have to consider. One is how much is the wind blowing? So how much is the wind blowing is going to create how much wind is generated, right? And then how much is distributed on the grid. We certainly, like from our data center, if anyone knows North Dakota, the part of North Dakota we're in is completely flat. So you can see the wind farms when you're standing in the data center, which is a really cool visual. And so they're close enough to be able to generate quite a bit of the power that we need. And we have been able to take advantage of that because we also have blockchain facilities that are near the data center we're building that has been taking advantage of that for a couple of years.
I think Applied has put out a number that some of these choices kind of can tabulate them, add up to about 85 million in savings a year versus the average data center. Maybe break into that a bit.
Yeah, I'll walk through that math a little bit.
Okay, great.
So if you're building a 100 megawatt data center right now somewhere else in the US or in a warmer climate in the US, you're going to get a higher PUEs. And if you don't have the advantage of having stranded power, you're going to get a higher price or higher rate. And the rate delta we're expecting and we have seen is about 4 cents. And the PUE delta that we have is we're sitting at a design PUE of 1.18, which is typically conservative because of the way design PUE is measured. So we're expecting our design PUE to be lower, where the design PUE of a data center that's sitting somewhere else is probably going to be about 0.15 points bigger. All of that, when you do the math of the amount of power it takes times the rate times the kilowatts times the hours, adds up to be between $40 and $60 million advantage that we would have over a similar 100 megawatt data center. We get close to an $85 million advantage if you talk about our data center versus today's infrastructure. So today's infrastructure, data centers are spread all over the country. The PUE has been going up, meaning they're running at about 1.56, 1.58 PUE. So 58% of the power, 0.58 part of the 1.58 is not used for server storage and networking. It's used for the cooling equipment and lights and other ancillary smaller power loads that are in the data center to be able to run those servers. And a lot of that, the reason that's gone up is one, we have a lot of aging infrastructure in data centers, but we also have air-cooled data centers as the requirements for power have gone up. And when those requirements for power go up and you have an inefficient solution to go cool them, you're going to get an inefficient PUE. So that's where we can get about $85 million savings per year if you're looking to put your infrastructure in one of the existing data centers versus building a greenfield new data center. And if you build it in North Dakota, you can get between a $40 and $60 million advantage.
Great. No, thanks for the breakdown. And that also, helps clarify that. I wanted to shift to, in the time we have left, talking about just, executing and operating in North Dakota. I think some of the earlier sessions, I think hopefully our audience got a good grasp of kind of the unique aspects of North Dakota, how it helped enable this project. I wanted to kind of turn to you to kind of walk us through some of the challenges as well as the advantages of operating in a rural region like North Dakota, how you build workforce readiness, system support, etc.
Absolutely. And one of the things, Phil, that attracted me to this role was small town. I grew up in a small town. I tend to like small town people because they tend to have to figure it out. You have to have sort of this approach to life that you can't buy it. You can't get a service that does it. You have to figure it out. And in many cases, you're in a very rural area where you don't have, other things to go help you. And that attracted me to this role because we are building in a very rural community. And we started many years ago working with the town to help them understand what we're doing, help them understand their concerns, integrate into the community, and make sure we address their concerns. Even things that are small, like when we were talking to tenants and they're talking about, well, we want a lighted perimeter so that we can have security on the site. We're saying we don't want light pollution for the town. Like one of the great things about North Dakota is there's no light pollution at night. So, okay, well then let's put sensors on the lights so that they go off when there's something approaching, but they're not on all the time. So even little decisions like that, we are thinking through to make sure that we integrate into the community. And we're working with the community to build the skills and the workforce we need to be able to support our data center. One of the things that we sort of missed early on was a lot of the recruiting we were doing for our data center. We were looking at data center people. Well, there aren't data center people in North Dakota. It's better to look at North Dakota people with the skills to run a data center than it is to look at data center people who want to move to North Dakota. And we've done really well at finding some critical facilities infrastructure talent across the Dakotas and across the surrounding areas who are excited about the mission of building this data center. And there's truly, in the colo environment, there's nothing like it in the US. So it's kind of a pioneering opportunity for all of us to be able to support Polaris Forge and all of the projects that we'll be building across North Dakota.
Any interesting lessons that you felt you've learned as a team from the just the commissioning and ramping up process? Anything that you could highlight?
Oh, so many. I mean, there are things that you don't think about, like how do you transport something that's that size to a place that remote? And how do you manage things as simple as trash? And how do you make sure that you have sleeping quarters inside the data center so that if there is a 14-foot snowdrift, that you have people that are able to stay there and shower and have food. So all of those things beyond the how do you build it? How do you make sure there's redundancy? How do you make sure that you build in the winter? Those challenges are there and in place, and most we've overcome and are behind us. The ones that are in front of us now is thinking about the workforce and keeping them safe, keeping them motivated, making sure they can do the work they need to do. They're on site when they need to be. They're not on site when they don't need to be. Those things are the things that we're working through now, and that are going to be an absolute fun challenge coming up.
And I assume that, in building this project out, you're going to apply some of those lessons to scaling up, because scale and expansion is where this is headed. Any challenges you foresee, or changes or shifts, or lessons learned as you look forward to that process?
Yes, what will be challenging and fun is while we are operating the first 100-megawatt building, we're going to be in construction on the next 150-megawatt building. And working on a construction site when you're not working on construction offers its own challenge. So even thinking about things as simple as parking, because when you're driving giant trucks on a construction site, you really don't want to pave everything because the pavement's going to be broken. However, you're going to want to have half the parking lot paved so that you can have workers in the first building. So thinking through all of those things, we've got a couple of days scheduled where we're going to bring the team together and just brainstorm. And in one of them, I am coining the term "what could go wrong." So it's truly a what could go wrong day. So anybody could come in with their idea or scenario of what they think might go wrong, and then we will go plan for it or ensure that we've already got plans in place for it. And it's a way of hopefully easing the tension of the team so they don't feel like they're not ready, and they feel like they're collaborating to come up with creative solutions before we ever have anything bad happen.
Oh, that sounds great. It sounds like an organic and ongoing process.
Yeah.
Definitely. Well, thank you, Laura, for the insights. I think today's discussion underscored that running a next generation data center like Polaris Forge in Ellendale, North Dakota is, about more than just infrastructure. It's about translating bold ideas into operational excellence through smart design, resilient systems, and the right partnerships. I'd like to thank the viewers for joining us for this episode of Architects of Acceleration. Be sure, this was episode 4. Be sure to tune in for episode 5 when we take a step back to reflect on what it really means to build and operate AI infrastructure at this scale. We'll be joined by Applied Digital CEO Wes Cummins and Chief Strategy Officer Jason Zhang, who will share their perspectives on lessons learned, strategic decisions, and what's next as the industry evolves. Thanks for joining us. If you'd like to connect, head to applieddigital.com or find Applied Digital on LinkedIn. We'll see you for episode 5. Thanks for your time again.
Thank you again, Phil, for having me.